formal classroom. By that I mean you may stand up, you may walk around, you may stretch. If you're having trouble staying awake, please stand up. It's hard to fall asleep when you're standing up, though I know some people have done it. Move around so you can see things. Okay? All right. Does anybody need to take a break? Well, Trinity does. Anybody else? Okay. Because I drink coffee in the morning, and sometimes it's for a very long morning if I don't take a break. All right, so the skull we're going to talk about in depth later. There's a colored skull back here that a student from a second year student colored for me. This gives you an idea of the number of different bones that are just on the skull. Okay, you'll need to know this, but not for this first practical. These vertebrae are called what?
Cervical.
Cervical vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae. How many are there? 7. Now the first two, it's just extra information. First two has specialized name. So C1 is the atlas, and C2 is the axis. Atlas and axis, and we'll talk about those later. The next set, thoracic vertebrae, lumbar. What's after the lumbar? The sacrum or the sacral. Individually is sacral. Since they're all fused, they're referred to as the sacrum. And then what's the bones in the tail? Coccygeal. The coccygeal. Let's go to the thoracic limb. So this bone right here, the scapula. And an interesting note is that the scapula does not have a bone-to-bone joint that attaches it to the body. It's all attached with muscle and tendons. Kind of explains why our animals are able to do some of the things they do. I mean, if you think about a cat jumping off the counter, how many times higher than itself is the counter? Considerably. It'd be like you jumping off a 3-story building. But because of the way they do it, and they've got a muscle that goes all the way around the thoracic cavity that acts like a little hammock. So when they jump, all that energy is just absorbed and allows them to do some of these things. The next joint is what? Distal to the scapula is a joint, the shoulder. Okay, the shoulder joint. Now I'll mention articular or articulating surfaces. So if I ask, what's the articulating surfaces? That means that's the surface of the bone that is part of the joint. It's actually making contact. Now, technically, the bone itself doesn't make contact. Usually there is cartilage that's actually making contact. Those are the articular surfaces, the part that moves. The next bone distal to the scapula is the humerus. And distal to the humerus is another joint. The elbow, okay? Pardon me? No, just the elbow. I don't make you learn the anatomical name. Because the shoulder and the elbow are just so common, you're just never going to hear it in any other way. Shoulder and elbow. Next, this bone right here that's on the cranial surface. Radius, and the little one, ulna, radius and ulna. So just so you know, this little protrusion right here is called the olecranon process. And I'm telling you the olecranon process because we're going to talk about the humerus in a moment. And this little notch right here is called the olecranon fossa. That's the little slot that olecranon process fits in. Okay. Distal to the radius is another joint.
Carpus.
The carpus. The carpus. There is a little tiny bone that's on the lateral caudal. It's an accessory carpal bone, and we'll talk about that later, but that's accessory carpal bone. Distal to the carpus. And by the way, if I ask you for the anatomical name of a joint, and you just can't remember what it is, a good guess is if you just take the name of the bone before it and the name of the bone after it and combine those words, I definitely will give you credit, at least partial credit for your answer, because most of the time that's how they're described. So the next bones distal to the carpus is what?
Metacarpal.
The metacarpal bones. Okay, the bones that are in the carpus are the carpal bones. The one that's distal, these long ones, which are right here in your hand. Metacarpals. Metacarpals. And then distal to the metacarpals are the digits, and they're comprised of, they're either called digits, more commonly they're phalanges. In people they're phalanges. People think of phalanges as fingers, and that's what they are. But they're phalanges because they're made up of phalanx bones. There's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and that's often called P1, P2, and P3. In the horse, they have some more specialized names, but for the dog and the cat, typically it's just P1, P2, P3, or phalanx 1, 2, and 3. Now they're numbered as well. So the first digit is which one?
Dew claw.
The dew claw. Okay, so remember you count medial to lateral. So the first one is the dew claw, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, same with the right hand. What if the dew claw is missing? What's this one?
Still 2.
Still 2. Doesn't get renumbered. A lot of dogs don't have dew claws. None of my dogs have dew claws. It's because they had them removed when they were 2 days old. Okay? Yeah, good question, Tiernese. And every year I get asked this, and I told my computer to look it up, and something distracts me. I think that it's an A. They give an A and a B designation.
So they have 3 floating dew claws in the back.
They have 2.
I've seen 3 though.
Yeah, but it's supposed to have 2.
Okay, so it would be like A1 or AB.
It'd be like 1A, 1B, and 1C. But I'm not gonna swear about that. Maybe you can find out for me. Maybe you can find out, but no, I'm not gonna test you on that. Heck no, I'm not gonna ask you something I don't know. Any questions on the dog? I think of something. Okay, so what surface is right here? Cranial. What about right here?
Lateral.
Lateral.
Medial.
Caudal. Dorsal.
Dorsal. Palmar.
Palmar. What about back here?
Cranial.
Cranial.
Caudal. Lateral. Medial. Dorsal.
Dorsal.
Plantar.
Plantar. All right, let's go to the pelvic limb. What was this limb called?
Thoracic limb.
Pelvic limb. The pelvis attaches to the body to what bone? The sacrum.
Sacrum.
The sacrum. Not the vertebrae. Now, technically, the sacrum is a vertebrae, but most people think that it's a lumbar vertebrae. But it's the sacrum. How many bones are fused together in the cat and the dog? In the sacrum. In the cat and the dog, there's 3.
3.
Okay? 3. And you can kind of feel them. It's hard to see. On this dog, you can feel 1, 2, 3. I don't know how prominent it is in the cat one. In the horse? 5. Horse and cow, they're 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The pelvis, there's a little socket, and it's called the acetabulum. The acetabulum of the pelvis is where the head of the femur fits in. Okay, so this bone right here is the femur. And there's a joint right here. What is this joint? The common name for this joint. The knee. It is also correct if you call it a stifle. There's a little bone right in front of the knee.
Patella.
The patella.
Mm-hmm.
Patella, and just for your information, it's the body's largest sesamoid bone. So the shape of it is called a sesamoid bone, or just sesamoid bone. Distal to the stifle is this bone, the tibia, and there's supposed to be a little thin bone here that's called the fibula. Fibula. There's no such thing as a tibula. It's the number one wrong answer. There's no such thing. It's a tibia and a fibula. Distal to that is this joint. What's the common name for this joint?
Tarsus.
Common name.
Elbow.
The hock. The hock. It is the tarsus. So if this is the tarsus, what are these bones?
Metatarsus.
Metatarsals. What is this first one right here on this model, if you can see it? And probably it's the same on yours. The first one on the models that we're looking at. It's which one? 2. Okay, why?
There's no dew
No
claw.
dew claw. It does on the back? Well, this one's missing dew claw as well. Is that one? That one really does? Huh. Did not notice that. Yeah. Somebody will rip them off eventually, then they won't have one. Okay, so distal to the metatarsals are what? The phalanxes, or the phalanges. So it'll be P1, P2, P3, phalanx 1, 2, and 3. Questions on the dog? Did I forget anything? Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk about the horse. So what's this? Scapula. Shoulder. Humerus. Ulna. Radius. Carpus. What else is this called? What is the carpus is made up of carpal bones. What's the common name for this?
The knee.
She's correct. Anybody hear her? What is it?
The knee.
The knee. Okay, on the horse, this is the knee. This little guy right here is the accessory carpal bone. Okay, I'm not quite too down here, but that's what that is. This is right here is the what?
Metacarpus.
Cannon bone. Yeah, it's the cannon bone. What is this one? Cannon bone. It's the same thing. Okay? So this is the left thoracic limb cannon bone. This is the right pelvic limb cannon bone. What is the anatomical name for this? Metacarpal 3.
3.
So what's this one?
Two.
Metacarpal 2.
4.
Metacarpal 4. What's the common name for these? Split bones. Okay, so if you were calling them split bones, you'd say the left thoracic limb right split bone. That tells you which one. I did say that right. It's the medial split bone. So it's the left thoracic limb medial split bone. And this is the lateral split bone. And if you said right, everybody would know what you're talking about. All right, so what joint is this? The what? The fetlock. Yeah, this is the fetlock. Does anybody know what the anatomical name for this is?
The wrist.
Remember what I said earlier.
The wrist.
So this is the
Metacarpal.
one of the metacarpals, and this bone is one of the phalanges. So the joint is the metacarpal phalangeal joint. carpophalangeal joint. I haven't talked about these yet, but these are also sesamoid bones back here. These are the proximal sesamoid bones. Sesamoid bones. And the reason they're called proximal is because there's a distal one, and that's way back here underneath. This little thin bone back here is the distal sesamoid, but it's more commonly called the navicular bone, and it's a source of a lot of horse injuries. Navicular bone. Okay, so let's go back and talk about the phalanxes. So yes, these are phalanxes. So this is phalanx 1, 2, 3, more commonly referred to as P, 1, 2, 3. They also have some other names. This is the long pastern. This is the short pastern. This is the coffin bone. The book also has a reference to it being called the pedal bone, P-E-T-A-L, the pedal bone. The joints, right here is the pastern joint. Makes sense. It's also referred to as the proximal, the middle pastern joint. And then this joint down here is most commonly referred to as the coffin joint. Coffin joint. Pastern, I think that's it. Phalanx, pastern. Seems like there was another one. The mind was blank. Okay, let's go to the scapula. I'm going to start off with this little guy here. This is the scapula. Looks somewhat like the dogs and the cats. They do vary somewhat. Sometimes on these models, I wonder if that's really the scapula that goes with that species. But the cat and the dog, unlike this model, the cat and the dog tend to have this more rounded edge. And I just think of it, the cat, being aerodynamic. So this is going to be on the cranial aspect. The spine is always lateral. Okay, always lateral. So by looking at that, based on what I just told you, is this the right or the left?
Right.
Does it go like this
Yes.
or like this? It's the right. Okay, it's the right. It goes like this. The other way you can tell is if you look at these little bumps right here. The one that's larger is cranial. And you can do the same thing on the horse. Okay, so if you look at the horse, this one's a little bit larger. So this is cranial. Once you determine what is cranial, then it's easy to name these. So this space right here is the supraspinous fossa. Fossa is just a term for an indentation. Supraspinous fossa. And if this one's supra, this one's infra. Infraspinous fossa. So we have the spine of the scapula,